This is the Underhill Conservation Commission meeting for September 11th, 2023. Before we begin our meeting, I would like to take a moment and have a moment of silence to remember and honor the fallen from the September 11th terrorist attack, now 22 years ago. So just take a minute of silence to remember them.
Oh, hi. No, I'm here too.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Before we start, are there any additions to the agenda or any changes that you'd like to have? No? All right. So
Oh,
then,
actually, can I also add that we are supposed to approve the June 12th minutes as well as the July 10th minutes. In the agenda, it was just July.
that's cool. Yeah. All right. Good. All right. So I'd like to introduce Hawkins-Hilke, and I know that I've written a little note about him, but for folks that may be looking at the recordings afterwards, I find out a lot of people actually do that after our meetings. I'd like to say that Jens is a wildlife biologist and conservation by design planner in ANR Fish and Wildlife Department. And he is also has worked with many communities in the state of Vermont on conservation planning and thinking about how to support Vermont's Act 171 in particular. And if you recall, 171 encourages towns to address protecting forest blocks and wildlife corridors and building that into their plans as they grow or change. And also to support the local forest products industries. That's a really key important part of Vermont. So that's part of it. Tonight, Jens is going to be providing some insights on strategic planning and what Underhill might undertake in the next year. So I'm going to turn it over to you. And
great.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for having me. I don't have a presentation planned. I have a series of questions for you all, really. And so I just wanted to start off in terms of strategic planning. How are you feeling about your work in the commission? And or your sense of the commission's work for those who aren't official members. Do you have the sense that there is a plan and that you know what's coming, or over the course of a year you know what the commission's work is going to be, or that that you have more interest in seeing certain topics represented that aren't represented. So I'm just trying to take your temperature in terms of the commission's work and what we can do to make everyone feel more comfortable or have more of a sense of a plan, of knowing what's coming. So just first thoughts. What are your feelings?
I think that the bulk of what we've been doing is providing, I think, a lot of education in one form or another. This past weekend was the culmination of a three-series workshop with monarch butterflies. And Trinity is the lead and expert on that and led us through a lot of that. And that was really a pleasure to do. And we've also had other educational guests. In the spring, we had the state I gotta think what her name is. Ally,
Kasiba,
Kasiba.
climate forester, she
Yeah.
was in the spring.
Yeah, and she presented in person here, and we recorded that, and that was a nice presentation. And then we also had in the spring, just in the same week, now I'm blanking on who that one it was, but that was really
Joseph
interesting too.
Lawrence on earthworms.
Right, the jumping worms.
Invasive.
Yes, I'm sorry, yeah. And so those two were very nice. We do things like support Green Up Day, and for Green Up Day, we had our town forest person who is also an entomologist, and he was at the town garage where we held it. We had a celebration, and he was showing families and children how to measure a big tree for the big tree contest that Sandy and our natural resources inventory and mapping committee has sort of started and partnered with the Conservation Commission for. So those are sort of a lot of the educational events that we've been doing. We have, in addition to that, some folks that are not here tonight, and I know one of them is on vacation in Maine too. A lot of people are combating invasives. And that was a huge effort by the Conservation Commission formally, and now it's individuals that are doing it on their own. They're going back to where the honeysuckle is that we attacked and pulled out. They're doing that just to keep it under control, and the same with the knotweed. And we have that on the town conservation district area, and we are constantly battling. So those are examples of education that I think is what we've been doing a lot. And I have a feeling that folks want to do additional things. Yeah. Although I know that Trinity's working with Daphne, who is not here tonight, on a plan for next year with the monarch butterflies, I think, fit into one of our. Yeah.
Awesome. So what does that plan look like?
Well, it's sort of a multi-part plan. So this year we started with a monarch rearing workshop just to provide some education and help folks who are already rearing butterflies do so in a safe way in terms of not spreading disease and learning how to tag monarchs. But in the future, we'd like to expand that to the schools in a more formal setting, look to possibly reach across the border to Mexico and create some interactions with other schools there to partner in conservation of monarch habitat. So one of the big problems in Mexico is the deforestation of the monarch overwintering oyamel trees. So that's part of it. Another part would be finding ways to preserve monarch habitat in our community and to help schools create pollinator gardens, to potentially even look to advocate at the state level for programs that support butterflies.
Excellent. Great. Well, I mean, already I've heard a lot, right? I spoke with Karen and Betsy and Daphne in maybe January of this year, and got a sense of this world of activity that you all are engaged in. And it sounds like you've got a lot of different irons in the fire. When you look at Vermont statute in terms of a conservation commission, everything says may. A commission may, and there's this long laundry list of all the things that you may get involved in. You may get involved with inventory, not only of natural resources, but of cultural resources, historic resources. You may advise your planning commission and other boards on anything related to natural resources. You may help with development review in an advisory capacity. You may receive gifts of land and money. You may steward town-owned lands. You may set up a conservation fund to purchase additional lands. So there's this huge range of activities that conservation commissions can get involved in. By comparison, a planning commission, the responsibilities are numerous, but they're more well defined. And the planning commission has to come up with a town plan every 8 years. And that's a major lift that's always on the schedule. So planning commissions tend to have to move a lot faster because there's such a huge range of things they have to tackle. And because of that 8-year cycle, there's usually limited time. Conservation commissions, on the other hand, may do, these huge range of activities, and there's not necessarily a cycle to it. So I often, I work with conservation commissions across the state, and many of them were formed in the 90s, and have matured to a place where they've dabbled in a bunch of different activities, and now are sort of thinking like, what do we do next? And that sort of that questioning of what to do next can have an impact on rates of volunteerism. People want to volunteer for a committee that they know what's expected of them. They know how much of a time commitment there is. They want social interaction. They want to be challenged, but they want it to be a discrete chunk of time and a known set of activities. So as conservation commissions are open to this huge range of activity that they can get involved in, it does make some sense to have a more nailed down strategic plan for being clear about what you as a commission want to handle, what you will handle in the next year, how much time that's going to take, how much effort you're going to throw at that, so that you as volunteers can feel nourished, right? So that it's not just one-off, oh, we did the butterflies, now the next thing. But you actually feel like each step is building on something, that you're building towards something a bigger. There's a through line to your volunteer work. So that's why I'm asking how folks are feeling, because I think that matters a lot, right? A commission needs to nourish the volunteers that serve on it.
Yeah, if I could just add that I was this summer shopping around for a commission to get on. As I said, I stepped down to alternate for the DRB. And so these folks kindly allowed me a gift membership for a while. And I also looked at the Natural Resources Inventory Committee. And when I came here, there were so many different ideas. In fact, I'm very interested in jumping worms. That's sort of my specialty, but that's not something that I necessarily wanted to get involved with as a committee. But to me, the way my brain works, there were so many options here for a conservation commission that it was too much for me. I felt like I don't have the expertise, and I wasn't quite certain where I could fit in or where things were going, or just what you said, what the plan was. In my mind, just the way my mind operates, I need something much narrower. Like the DRB, we follow the zoning regulations and we have to apply them, so it's very strict. And that's how my mind works. So the Natural Resources Inventory Committee, I spoke to Sandy, and she welcomed me onto that. And that has a very specific focus. So that's what felt more comfortable for me. And sadly, I had to say that I wouldn't be able to participate in this committee because it made me nervous. It was too broad, it was too broad for my brain. I just didn't know what to do with it.
Yeah, and I mean, many volunteers feel that way, not just, across the state. Like there's so many things that you can do that it seems totally overwhelming because it's clear you're not going to do them all. You're not. So then what are you going to do? And are you going to feel like you've accomplished something in the face of all of that world of opportunity? Is there going to feel like there's a sense of accomplishment for you all as active volunteers? Also for folks shopping around looking for a volunteer experience, that's real.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So when you're advising committees, do you suggest we've got a bunch of different ideas happening here, and I'm new, so I'm coming with my own new ideas, but you guys have the history. Do you suggest narrowing it down so the whole committee can get behind those few ideas, or do you recommend splitting off a couple of different ideas and forming subcommittees around those? What is your recommendation?
Both. So the process that I would suggest is starting with what are the things that you're already committed to doing? What are the things that happen every month or every year or every 8 years that you need to do? Green Up Day. You need to be a part of Green Up Day every year. Okay, what's that universe of things that you've already committed to that are already on the books? What are things that other commissions in town have signed you up for? What's in the town plan? Most town plans will have an implementation chapter where they will assign responsibilities to different groups. So, great, grab all of those things that the planning commission or select board have signed you up for, and get those out and add that to the list. And so those are the must-dos. Then brainstorm. What are the can-dos? And some of those, I think, everyone needs to get behind. An annual outreach campaign, walks and talks, whatever it is, that sort of educational piece. And really has to be in the strategic plan. And I think everybody needs to be a part of that. But I think there's also room for subtasks or subcommittees that maybe a few passionate people take on, and it isn't everyone's thing. And so I think there's room for both. And the way we would do that is by assigning an effort level. So what I've done in the past is we've gotten together all the things that you have to do, and we could start that short list tonight. What are the things you've already signed up for? And then when everybody on the commission is present, we would do that brainstorm. What are the things we could do? Understanding what we have to do. What are the things we could do? And so some of those are going to be pet projects of an individual, and that's fine. We want to. Not central to the work of the commissions. If somebody's passionate about jumping worms, hey, you go, and we could make that a part of the commission's work. So then you would do that. You would do that brainstorming session. Then you could reorganize the raw brainstormed list and put things in buckets. Okay, the jumping worms, the monarchs, let's put all of that in the education bucket. And then we'll have sub-bullets for different aspects of the education. Let's have another bucket for, I don't know what, maybe it's development review, maybe it's invasives, maybe it's riparian restoration. The buckets will sort of form out of the brainstorm list. So you reorganize your brainstorm list. And then you would get everybody to vote on that list. And there would be 8 questions, and you would vote 8 times for each project idea. does this help the commission does this help the commission meet its mission? Does this help the town meet the goals in the town plan? Is this something we can accomplish? Is this something that you're personally passionate about? So I have this list of 8 questions that you would apply to each of those items in the brainstorm list. And then we would come back for another meeting and we would look through those scores as a starting point, not the end all be all, but as a starting point, and say, okay, on the 1 to 5 scale, this got a 3, high, pretty high, or this got a 4, really high. So seems like everyone wants that to be a part of the commission's work. Great. Now, as a commission, let's decide how much energy we would throw at that. Is that a one-time, once-a-year sort of thing, or is that a across 6 months sort of thing? And so you could assign it. So you would say, what do we want to carry forward into our strategic plan? And I would do that a 5-year plan. What would we want to put it in the strategic plan? How much energy do we want to throw at that? And then you could go down your list, and then you would have the items that you would want to carry forward and how much energy you would throw at them. And then you would translate that into a calendar across 5 years and say, okay, well, let's do the field-based stuff in the summer. And you start filling in months over the summer. And let's do the education stuff in the spring and the fall, and maybe even a bit in the winter, and start filling those months in. And then, okay, what's the stuff we can do in the winter, and start filling that in. And so when you're done, you have this visual representation of which tasks you're going to do in which months over the next 5 years. And some of that, your outreach campaign, it's going to be throughout those next 5 years. But by planning it out, it allows you to have something of a through line. So if you're interested in forest blocks and connectivity, well, maybe for a while you're doing outreach just about forests. What is a forest? What's a healthy forest? You could get into disease. You could get into invasives. You could get into threats to forest. What about climate change? Then you could get into connectivity. How do animals move? What's bobcat movement look like? And do a thing on bobcat. And then get into, okay, well, what's the larger pattern of bobcat movement across Underhill or across Vermont? So my point is, by mapping this out across 5 years, you could build on something. And so just like you're doing with the monarchs, the first year you tackle the breeding basics, then you head into the next step. And so you can map out your strategy. So by the time 5 years are up, if you happen to be with the commission that long, you have seen that through line. You've seen how we built from trees to forests to connectivity to climate, just as a made up example.
And that would get documented, so a prospective volunteer would see what the plan is, and if they want to plug into that, or
Yes.
where they would plug into that.
Yes, and so you want it certain enough that you all who are there for the full 5 years see that come into fruition, and yet fluid enough that somebody new comes in and is all passionate about invasives, that they have a little bit of leeway to take the invasives issue and run with it. So that document helps you all feel good about your volunteerism. It helps you feel like you know where you're going and why you're here. It helps new members understand where you all are headed and why bother. And it also helps when it comes time for budget time and the town's like, what's the commission doing anyway? You liberal tree huggers, you're off, doing something different. And you can say, no, this is our plan. This fits into the town plan in this way. There's a 5-year plan here, and all of this is based in the town plan and what the people of Underhill expect of us. So the document allows allows has all these different uses to it. So not just for prospective volunteers, not just for current volunteers, but also for people from outside that are trying to assess your progress.
Mm-hmm.
That workshop we did last spring, that wasn't just a one-off. That was something we're building into this larger series of events.
And how do you imagine that gets literally documented? Is that something on a website? Is that something in a document that's published? Is that an actual calendar? How do you recommend that all gets tracked, that you can refer to it, that people can read it and understand it?
So I just explained that process. What I do is at the end of that, so I do that all in Excel, actually.
Okay.
But I can convert it to anything. And so at the end, the 5-year plan has every 12 months, 5 times, and then colors for each when activity's happening, and then the list of projects. So you can see how, okay, this field-based project, we pick it up summer, 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 summer. Okay, this educational project, we're maybe there are different points to it. We do the breeding the first year. We do the management implications the second year. We begin reaching out to conservation partners the third year. So it's a visual thing that maps it out chronologically. But I think for the commission's work, there are other ways that you would want to map that out. Oftentimes, the sentence that you use to describe a project needs more. I can say riparian corridor work, and you could say, great, what? Are we replanting trees? Are we taking trash out of the riparian area? Are we promoting buffer areas, vegetative buffers? Are we working with the town development review board to limit development? What do you mean by that? So the shorthand of that list of projects often needs a sentence or two to describe the shared understanding of what the group is. And that might morph a little over time. So in addition to this Excel document that's the visual representation of the next 5 years, you might also want a list of those projects with a sentence or two next to each one, explaining what the sort of intent is behind that project. So I've done this for several towns. Some of them have taken it and run with it, and others have sat on a shelf. I worked with Tunbridge quite a bit last. Done it for Montpelier. There have been a few other towns that have done this. But something like that might help you as a group feel, you're already doing excellent stuff. So it's not a question of whether you're doing excellent stuff or not. It's a question of how you feel about it and how you can show that it's part of something bigger, both for yourselves and for potential volunteers and for the town as well. So I just talked for a whole long time, and I didn't mean to do that. So what? Yes, Andy, jump in.
So I serve on other committees, which I think would really feed into what requirements you have from the town plan. For example, in the town plan, it assigns the Conservation Commission to a lot of identify steep ridge lines, identify wildlife corridors, all of these things like that, which is essentially what the Natural Resource Inventory Committee has contracted with Arrowwood to do, is to come up with the maps and describe all that. So if I was, developing this strategic plan, that would be like year one, and you've already like got this huge start on it. And then the second part of that is, okay, once you have that, you have to do the outreach with landowners, the outreach with the community, and kind of see it through there. So that's going to be, from our perspective, Arrowwood should be finishing by the end of June. So starting in July, we should have results and be able to do that part of it. So I think it would feed really nicely into your planning schedule to just plan on that. I know Karen serves on that committee already, but to have the whole group involved with it and understand it, I think would be just really super. And then on I'm on the climate change task force, and we have some information coming out that the Planning Commission is now reviewing. Our There are some really high priority things in there that I think you could already have in your plan, things that are already identified in the town plan, but in the climate change document, it's just more specific. So it's not like it isn't already part of your purview. It's just kind of identifying those. And I think hydrologic areas are really important with all the recent flooding and the anticipation of more trying to build the resilience of the community. I think that would be a really valuable way to start informing residents about that. So they understand, like, here's the models, here's the limitations, all those kind of things like that. Yeah. So those are just a couple areas that I thought about. And then, of course, forests and wildlife corridors. I mean, those are essential. We know
I think to your point, the coordination between all of the different committees is also helpful so that you're all chugging in the same direction, that no one feels like anyone's stepping on anyone's toes, but also that the baton can be passed from one group to the next. So, come July, is it the Natural Resource Inventory Committee's responsibility to explain that inventory and celebrate the results of that inventory with the public? Or is that the job of the Conservation Commission? The answer, whatever, you all know the answer, or maybe you don't, but that's just an example of, like, that's a potential baton passing, right? If the inventory committee is in charge of getting the inventory to happen, maybe the Conservation Commission can do everything in its power to celebrate those results. And maybe it's one element at a time. Let's celebrate wetlands in Underhill this month. Let's celebrate our rare natural communities. Let's celebrate these rare species that we found. Let's make sure people know more about these results, so that years down the line, should there be regulation associated with some of those elements, there are no surprises. It's all about regulatory predictability, right?
Okay.
You're not trying to take anything from the town. You're trying to celebrate what the town already has. Anyway, but to just sort of make sure, I'm not trying to say that everyone needs to stay in their lane. I'm just saying that everyone needs to know what everyone's responsibilities are, so that there can be exchange between the groups, appropriate exchange. What sort of questions are coming up? What sort of concerns?
I don't know. I think for me, I just think of our group as really focused on education and invasive species. I feel like those are our two big things. Are there things that, like, we are really missing? I know when I think about, what the Vermont statute says, conservation commissions can do, it's like really big, and some of it I think is, I don't know, working with zoning and stuff like that would be beyond my, I don't know, area of expertise. So I don't know. Are you here because there's something we're not doing that we're supposed to be doing?
I am not here because of that. I am here because I was invited.
And you invited invited him.
Good.
So I am not the cop that you not to get biblical, but you've left undone things that you ought to have done.
No.
No, but I mean, force blocks and connectors, force fragmentation and climate change are related problems that are front and center in my mind. And I think need to be well represented in every commission's work. And forest fragmentation, we are talking about development there, and we're talking about your pattern of development. And Underhill has lots and lots of north-south roads. Everything is north-south roads. And so you have these long north-south ridges or north-south natural areas and very little east-west connectivity. If you allow for anyone in Underhill to decide what the pattern is going to look like, it isn't going to work for wildlife. So just this is a quick and dirty sentence, but that there has to be planning to maintain forest blocks and connectors. So I do think there is some interaction there with the Planning Commission. It's generally speaking, I think the Conservation Commission has the time to wrestle with the issues and understand some of the science and then explain that to the Planning Commission. I don't know, not every Conservation Commission has the expertise to write an appropriate, regulatory whatever. But together, the commissions can do that. If the Conservation Commission can do its education well and translate the things that the Planning Commission act on, together the commissions can do that.
Yeah.
Climate change. If forests and connectivity and wild and the movement of species is a huge part of that. Flooding and the pattern of vegetation and wetland that protects the town and personal property from flooding is another part of that. So there are all these different aspects of climate change that I think are within the purview of the commission.
I think at the Planning Commission last Thursday night, the Climate Change Committee was there, and over the course of the last 2 months, people have presented a segment of the plan that it wasn't an ad hoc group, it was a appointed group, came to that created. Sandy was the leader for that, the chair of the committee, but a lot of it was talking about forest blocks, corridors, and also resilience from flooding and things like that. In the planning, and some of that was translated into planning, perhaps regulations on driveways, slopes of the driveway, how to build driveways, and how to limit the number of little driveways. And that was part of that conversation that also impacts us, because we're there talking about resilience to flooding, and the way that Underhill is. I mean, you pointed it out very well. It's north-south, and we have all these little rivers that are coming down into the valleys of the the two big valleys, and the only valley is really in Underhill. And so it's very much put together. In my mind, I think we are sort of supporting some of the committees in their work, but maybe it's not apparent. Maybe I haven't done a good job in explaining how I see the links to it. For example, carbon sequestration and forest blocks are together in my head. And one of the reasons we invited Allie was to talk about sequestration in the forests, to kind of have people starting to think about that forests really are our friends, our allies. It's not something you want to chop down to put a housing development to necessarily. I mean, depending.
Jens, if I could when you talk about it, it makes sense. When Lori talks about it, it makes sense. And I wanted to give you an example of when I was on the DRB, looking at some of the regulations that would say, when we're reviewing a development, minimize development in sensitive areas. And that was always so frustrating to me because I didn't know what it meant, minimize, like what authority do we have? What is a sensitive area? What authority do we have? What are the options? Have we gotten, I would always think, have we gotten any direction from the Conservation Commission on that? But then when I started coming to Conservation Commission meetings, I realized that really the topics are so broad. I mean, the Conservation Commission can only cover so much with so many people. There's invasives and monarchs and jumping worms, and then there's the huge big picture of climate change and forest fragmentation. And how does all of that get spread around a few people? It just, when you talk about it, I get excited and it makes sense. But when I think practically how it would work, I just don't see how it would work. I think I had bigger expectations. I had different expectations for the Conservation Commission. I was thinking more in terms of the resources inventory. I think now that I can plug into that, like I need some direction on the Development Review Board. The zoning regulations need direction. What is forest fragmentation? Where are we as a community deciding not to? And I was thinking that was the Conservation Commission that would handle that topic. But there are so many topics. You're talking about a through line of some really important, big issues of climate change or resilience from flooding. And we're also talking about monarch butterflies and jumping worms. And I just don't see how they can meet in a small group so well.
Let me just back you up. So regulations, a good regulation is clear. A good regulation leaves only a little bit of wiggle room for a DRB to interpret it so that the regulation doesn't come across as draconian or too harsh. You have enough wiggle room that common sense can say, all right, well, in this weird special case, we can move something, and we have enough wiggle room to do that, but not more wiggle room than that. A good regulation doesn't allow for that sort of uncertainty. The good regulation is going to be crystal clear what the intent is, what the area impacted is, what the definition of those terms are, and what exactly is going on. So I haven't read Underhill's regulations in a long time. Nothing is fresh in my mind, so I am not at all critiquing your regs or anything like that. Please don't misunderstand. This is coming from ignorance, not knowledge. But when you have a good, well-written regulation, it shouldn't allow for that sort of uncertainty, because DRBs are neighbors regulating neighbors. That is a very difficult place to be. And you want to have that document clear so that when you're regulating your neighbor, it's because it's on the books. It's because everyone in town agreed to it, not because you as a DRB member feel one way or the other. So I think that uncertainty comes from a lack of communication and effort in between the Conservation and Planning Commissions when those regs are being drafted. What's the intent? How far are we going? Where exactly do we want to regulate? In towns like South Burlington, they're regulating the quality of the data they have to use is to the inch. There is such focus on the extent of they just have the quality of the data they need, and the quality of the regulations has to be so high because there's so much development pressure. In towns like Underhill, elsewhere in Vermont, we tend to be a little bit looser, and therefore it's less effective. So, without knowing anything on the specifics, what your example said to me was that's a bad regulation. And the Conservation Commission needs to do more education about why and what, and the planning commission needs to write better rules.
That requires
I
coordination
hear you.
between committees.
Yes.
But it also requires a type of focus that how does that work with the Conservation Commission when we're also working on jumping worms? You know, I mean, just how do you find the time, or how do you find the focus for such a big picture? And I think that the mapping committee is helping there. I mean, we're identifying right now. We're trying to identify where the important areas are in town. I mean, that's a very important first step, I think, to then decide. Then now that these areas are important, what do we want and not want there? So I think that subcommittee is helping with that. But going back to just the expectations of the Conservation Commission, that's a huge thing. That's a huge thing.
And if I may, just one sentence, and I'll shut up, I promise.
And I'll shut up.
I can shut up. That's why I'm suggesting strategic planning, is so that you don't have too many issues out there, that you're more clear on the issues you take on, and the ones you take on, you do well. And there can be a few side issues, absolutely, to keep people interested, to diversify. You know, you don't have to just do one thing the whole time, but there are not too many of those. And so that's why the strategic planning allows you to be much more concise. What are we here for?
Do other conservation commissions ever put out a job request in the community saying, we're looking for somebody to help us with these specific issues?
Oh, cool.
I'm just asking.
No, I've never seen that, but that's neat.
Front porch forum.
I mean, I'm just saying, if we don't have enough manpower and there's specific,
And
like you said,
expertise.
we need people with specific expertise, we need people with specific capacity, and
Yeah,
why don't we could we,
absolutely.
does anybody ever just put out a job request saying, this is the job, this is what we consider we consider this critical to our strategic plan.
Yeah, I think that's great. And if somebody read that and had that expertise and said, well, gosh, there's a commission that knows what they want. They told me they want me. Yeah, I think that's awesome. It does remind me, sorry.
One suggestion I have on that is a lot of people want to be involved, but they don't want to do it for 3 years or, that sort of thing. If you're tackling water resources, for example, and you could put out a request for someone with expertise to advise you over the next few months or something like that, I think it would be easier for people to jump in on short-term projects like that. That would be my suggestion.
Yeah, I agree. I was also just going to come back to the Conservation Commission handbook. And if you haven't read it, I would suggest reading it. At the very least, skim the table of contents and poke around. It's online on the Association of Vermont Conservation Commission's website, so vtconservation.com. But there's a whole chapter about forming a commission, and not just with diverse expertise, but other sorts of skills. Who's the networker? Who knows everybody in town and is that networker? Who's different leadership styles? Who's the person, the closer that gets stuff done? Who's the grand visionary? But there's a good section in there about forming your commission and thoughts on those different sorts of skill sets. So I would recommend that. And in that same Conservation Commission handbook, there is a chapter on strategic planning, and I helped write it, so you might sound familiar.
And how do we get the right person to do the right job? Do we know who the right person is? Do we ask you, what are the skill sets we're looking for, for some of these ideas we've been tossing around today? Or do we have that? Do we know that?
Well, we might know some of it. I mean, for example, sometimes there is a person that works for the USDA and she's an expert on fish in brooks and fish. We might, if we're talking about something like that, I think she would be very interested in doing for a short time. But we don't know a lot of necessarily.
Do we then come back to somebody like you and say, can you help us draft the wording for what we're looking for, or who, like, or is that in the?
Yes, I'm happy to help. I think you're going to be. I mean, Underhill is really interesting town. You have an incredible array of professionals. I mean, with really varied skill sets. Like the folks I know from the university or from the state that live in Underhill, I know for a fact that you have a huge, a large, human resources? But you're limited by your volunteers, and this is a volunteer commission. And so back to Sandy's point is, folks are scared to volunteer. Towns are looking for so many volunteers on so many fronts. No one wants to get sucked in. So time limited requests are very helpful, just as Sandy said. We want, and again, that goes back to the strategic plan. Like, we're going to be hitting this topic for this long. It's time limited. We're not going to be asking you again and again and again for the next 6 years for something. And that will allow you to bring in more people, but for shorter time.
Yeah. And we do have, we do have some experts in town for different topics. So a lot of like entomologists and wildlife biologists and
they're not going incognito. No, they actually can tell who they are.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know who they are.
Yeah. Sandy knows who they are too.
Yes.
Right, Sandy? Yeah. So.
But again, that time limited thing, that's a big deal for volunteers. As I'm sure you all well know. Like you want to be careful, a lot of people are careful about what they volunteer for. And I mean, our PTO is there's so few volunteers in our PTO that if you sign up for even the slightest thing, they're going to be asking you for a lot more. And I mean, of course, but it's also, it always feels like a slippery slope. And so I'm well aware, I'm on both sides of that feeling of like, I need to protect my time here, or they could just use me up. But also I do want to give. And so those time limited things are better. So we're at 7:30. Closing thoughts here. Did I get anyone excited about strategic planning?
You're going to show us your spreadsheet.
I will share that spreadsheet with you, yes.
And how other towns may do it, and what their plans are, maybe a 5-year plan from another town?
Sure, I have an old one from
examples.
Montpelier, I have Tunbridge, I probably have a couple others.
That would be really good, helpful.
Yeah.
So would you suggest for our next meeting, like doing something like the voting you mentioned, kind of doing your eight questions for the cultural topics?
No, I would recommend and we really want everyone on the commission to be there. But for first one, I would do gathering the list of all the stuff you signed up for and the brainstorm. And then, and that's one meeting. Do the voting we can do on Google, Google Sheets, in between the two meetings. And then a second meeting where we go through the list with the scores and we look at the results and we decide which of those we want to carry forward into the strategic plan and how much effort we want to throw at those. So that would be 2 meetings.
You use the we? Are you including yourself in that, or we?
I'm certainly happy to help.
Yes.
Oh.
Yes.
Oh, you're here for the duration, eh?
But don't, but don't.
Up to 3 years. 3 months. 3 weeks.
I'm getting paid for this.
Oh. And the 8 questions that you mentioned, are those in the handbook, the conservation commission?
No, I'll show you those on the spreadsheet when I give you Tunbridge and Montpelier stuff. I think I got most of them. There are a couple I'm missing, but.
Oh.
And I think everybody but you, I don't know, Trinity, do you have a handbook? We handed them out.
Let me just check. I know we talked.
Yes,
I think I do.
Yeah, yeah. So we
It's
can.
linked in some
Yeah.
meeting minutes too.
Yeah.
In May.
Yep, I've got it.
Oh,
I've got it right here.
go ahead. We have to
Printed
study
in black and white.
it.
It's
So
exciting.
it's exciting.
It's exciting.
And one of the things that we'd like to have are people that come in to participate, and they're welcome even if they're not officially appointed on the commission.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's how we get Penny or,
How many people are on the commission, Karen?
you can have up to 9 in the state of Vermont, but
Oh,
we have 7. Except that we have one now that has resigned. He resigned. I think he got overwhelmed on thinking about strategic planning. I should have put it in the email.
Commissions also get locked into like, are you on the commission or not on the commission? And that's not helpful
No.
because subcommittees of the commission should absolutely involve people that aren't on the commission. And that, is how you can bring in those experts for time limited, whatever, or, specialized skills, and not have to sign up for a 3-year thing. So you can use subcommittees effectively, and that's also doesn't run afoul of the open meeting law because you don't have a quorum in your subcommittee. You have 2 people from the subcommittee and 3 other volunteers, and they've been charged by the committee with a certain task to do things in between committee meetings. And so that's how you can sort of grow the number of people that are working, the number of activities that you're involved in.
So that by you're saying that means it doesn't have to be publicly warned, or
Right.
meeting minutes don't have to
Right.
be okay for the subcommittees.
Right.
Okay.
Like if 4 members of this commission meet each other in a driveway and happen to start talking business, that's illegal. Because that would be quorum. You're talking about town business and it's not a warned meeting. If 2 of you get together with 4 other volunteers and hold a meeting, that's not a problem.
Okay.
Because that's not, if the commission has tasked you with a certain obligation, you're going to report back at the next publicly warned meeting.
Right.
So that's not running afoul of the open meeting.
It's not a transparency issue that nobody wants to be transparent. It's just one of those obstacles of having to go through the hassle of warning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. That for me, that went without
Yeah.
saying. Yes.
Yes.
But I should have said it. Yes.
Yeah, that would work well. I mean,
Right.
especially for some folks that, that would like to meet, not necessarily in a formal way, but would
Right.
participate. So.
Right. And I, for instance, have a problem coming here and participating in it all, but I'd be happy to come, as I've said, if you have little projects, I'm happy to join in on that.
Yes. Yeah.
Great.
Good.
Well, with that, I hope this was helpful and interesting. I am absolutely happy to help you take this to the next level. When you talk to the rest of your members and see what you think about doing something like this, please let me know.
Yeah.
The only difficulty is getting in my calendar as I work with all 251, 268 actually. There are 268 municipalities in Vermont.
Oh, are
Yeah.
there?
And they all know your name?
Well,
Yeah.
like Essex and Essex Junction just separated, so those are separate municipalities. Enosburg Falls. So,
That's true.
yeah.
but it's Underhill, not Underhill Flats and Underhill Center.
Well, he's from the Flats area.
Yeah, I'm from the other side.
We're all from the center.
Right.
Yeah.
Duly noted.
Yes. Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, my pleasure.
All right, Sandy. So thank you very much.
My pleasure.
All right. Well, Patrick, can you stay so we can approve some minutes, please?
Certainly.
You.
Yeah, we'll be in touch.
Okay, all right, thank you. Yes, all right.
Have a great night.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for joining us.
Okay, well. So that's informative and helpful.
Definitely. Yes.
Yeah, and it's Patrick. So do you,
calling you? Or-
yeah, no, it's, I don't know what's going on here.
Okay.
Okay. It's my son. Cool, but it's okay. I told him I couldn't talk to him right now.
Okay.
All right. Yeah. All right. So the next thing on the agenda and is the mission statement, and actually, we might want to put that off until the next meeting. Yeah, because really,
Betsy's not here.
Betsy's not here, and
And
Yeah.
Daphne's not here.
Daphne's not here, and so I think it would be better if we put it off. And then approval of the minutes. So we have 2 sets of minutes, and have folks read them? I've read them a long time ago, and I don't think I had any changes, or I would have sent them back, changed them in
Yeah.
Google Docs.
That's good.
Yeah. So is there a motion then to approve the June 12th
Yep.
minutes?
I motion
All
to
right.
approve the June 12th.
Okay. And
minutes.
then a second, Patrick, can you second that motion?
Second.
Okay. That approved, thank you. And now a motion for the July
I motion to approve the July
10th minutes. Okay. I'll second that.
Okay. I don't know if I can second my own. Can I?
Yeah,
Can I
you can.
motion and second?
Yes,
Okay. Minutes that I wrote.
yes.
Good to know. Discussion?
No, all right. All in favor then of approving the July 10th minutes? Okay, thank you. Here. So there was no one from the public here. I think Sandy was, there, I just got rid of that. Sandy was here, and Penny, I guess, is public. And I think moving forward, I'm just going to touch bases with Brad to see how, I don't think there's any issue with the select board what happens with commissioners is, or committee members are usually appointed by the select board, but I think ad hoc folks don't need any kind of appointment. I'll talk with them about that. And
Is that for Penny? Or
that would be for Penny
Yeah.
or Sandy if she wanted to participate. And so, yeah.
did we want to talk about the email or how we want to? Has anyone responded to Craig?
To Craig,
Yeah.
I haven't, because I just got my internet back this morning, today, so I have not responded to him. So
I haven't responded.
Oh, I know. Wait, Craig, actually, this was on the table when we arrived. Oh my goodness. Fortunate. So this is, I think, all of our utensils. I don't know whose basket that is. And then Daphne's. Okay. So, and then, right. So, dear UCC, thank you for your generosity earlier this summer when I had anaplasmosis. Not worrying about dinner took pressure off of an already stressful scenario. I look forward to attending upcoming events. Feel free to reach out with any need for assistance, etc. Sorry, I cannot fully commit. Sincerely, Craig. So he's one that wants to do some
Yeah.
things, but not everything.
Right,
And I get that. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So, yeah, this was just sitting here when I came in, and I
put that in the
picked it up and put it off. It's very lovely. Actually, maybe do you want to put this note in our minute?
Mhm.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
Thank
I'll type
you.
it up.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, so.
Did we want to respond or kind of like respond individually, or was there?
I need to respond,
Okay.
and then we can all, and anybody else is welcome to, and I'll CC y'all.
Okay.
I just, tomorrow is move day for my mother,
Yep.
so
Yep.
I've been
Busy.
really busy today.
Yeah.
Hey, Patrick, Mimi is moving up to Essex Junction.
No
Assisted
kidding.
living.
Wow. How's she doing?
But she's okay.
Great.
Yeah. Motion then to adjourn the meeting.
I motion to adjourn the meeting.
And we need a second?
I'll second that.
Okay. All in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
All right, so adjourned. Thank you. All right, thank you. Thank you, Patrick, for coming.
Adio.